Tonight on Ukraine Today, new Ukrainian strikes, a logistics hub at a railway station in Russia's Rostov region has been hit. A meeting in Moscow. What did Trump's special envoy Witkov discuss with Russian dictator Putin? Waiting for Trump's statement. Is it possible that the US president will increase economic pressure on Russia as early as tonight? Joint military drills. China and Russia conducted large-scale maneuvers in the Sea of Japan. What are they preparing for? All that and more coming up right now. Hello, my name is Volodymyr Robchun. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's get to the news. Ukrainian drones have struck the enemy's logistics hub at the Tatsinskaya railway station in Russia's Rostov region, twice in just one day. The strike caused a massive fire. Russia's so-called Ministry of Defense claimed it shot down 51 drones over Russia and temporarily occupied Crimea. In the past 24 hours, Russia lost at least 1,010 soldiers killed and wounded. This brings the total losses since the start of the full-scale invasion to 1,059,270. Also yesterday, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed one Russian tank, 52 artillery systems and dozens more pieces of Russia's military gear. 2 people were killed and 12 injured in a Russian missile strike on the Zaporizhzhia region. Putin's terrorists targeted a recreation base. Among the wounded, 4 children. Buildings and cars were damaged. Occupiers also hit a gas facility in the Odessa region. A massive fire broke out. The flames were seen all the way from Romania. Due to the damaged pipeline, 2,500 households were left without gas. Russian forces also attacked Dnipro, Kherson, Kharkiv and Donetsk regions overnight. In Kupiansk, rescuers still can't finish clearing the rubble of a residential building destroyed by Russia. Why? Because the enemy keeps using FPV drones to target them. The strike happened on the night of August 5th. People could still be trapped under the rubble. Meanwhile, in Kyiv, a man who was seriously injured in the July 31st attack has died in hospital. That brings the total death toll from that Russian terrorist strike to 32. Our condolences to the families and loved ones of those killed. Norway, Sweden and Denmark will finance a new batch of American weapons for Ukraine worth about $500 million. The goal is to boost Ukraine's air defenses. For security reasons, the exact list of weapons won't be made public. Earlier, the Netherlands announced a similar package, and according to NATO, more of these packages are on the way. In temporarily occupied Donetsk, people are facing a full-blown humanitarian crisis. They simply have no water. The occupation authorities are pretending to solve the problem, but the water still isn't coming back. More in our report.
Donetsk, it's raining outside. The bitter truth of life. We're collecting water.
Residents of the temporarily occupied part of Donetsk region report a humanitarian and environmental disaster due to the region's water supply. Even global media outlets are writing about this.
Look at what they've driven people to. They're scooping up water straight from the asphalt, from a storm drain that's burst. How far do people have to be pushed to end up like this? It's a nightmare.
Summer of 25. Water rarely comes out of the taps, and it almost never reaches the upper floors of apartment buildings. It's only turned on for a few hours every 3 days in Donetsk itself, and every 2 days in some other cities.
There's water, but there isn't any water. The tank has been empty for 3 days. There was no water on Saturday, Sunday, or Monday. There's no water.
In Donetsk, people greet the arrival of water trucks like a holiday.
Today is a happy day for us because they brought us water. We're grateful, of course. Thank you. The neighbors quickly gathered.
People hurry to the tanks with canisters and buckets standing in line. This is often the only way to get water for drinking, cooking, and basic hygiene. The situation in occupied Mariupol and Berdyansk is no better.
July 29th, another water delivery. 5th floor. The time is 18:45. I don't know if this water pressure will wash me away or not.
Putin's water trucks from Moscow have arrived in the region, but it's just a drop in the ocean.
So we need to help out. How can you live without water? You can't manage without water.
But Pushilin still managed to get some publicity.
There you go.
Ah, you're all...
Heavy equipment. Let me hold it.
Yeah.
The problem lies with the leadership of the DPR. Pushilin has been in charge of the DPR for more than 6 years. During this time, few good things have happened in the Republic. Mariupol is currently being rebuilt with federal funds and help from the regions. But overall, Pushilin hasn't even managed to ensure a supply of water. I wouldn't be surprised if the issue of his replacement is raised soon, said a source in the Kremlin's political bloc.
The water supply crisis in Donbas has reached such a level that Putin summoned the head of the quasi-republic for a dressing down. They expressed deep concern. Of course, there still won't be any water.
Honestly, I have to say that the most difficult issue and the most serious challenge for us is, of course, the issue of water supply. The issue became more acute for us after the enemy imposed a water blockade.
Pushilin found someone to blame for what happened. Supposedly, Ukraine is to blame for everything, not Russia, which has turned an entire region into a humanitarian disaster zone. For this, Pushilin could very well lose his head, or more precisely, the position he has been desperately trying to hold on to for the past 3 years.
People want to tear Pushilin apart in the city's central square. They need somewhere to channel all the pain they've accumulated over all these years. And they will tear him apart like the perfumer from that very movie. Only the smells will be different, obviously, because the stench there is wild right now. People are unwashed.
Most likely, the change of Donbas leader won't happen until next year. After all, someone will have to take the blame for everything the separatists have done in Donbas over all these years.
Look at what you're doing. You gave us water, but we can't use it. And how long do I have to wait for it to even register on the meter? How long do I have to suffer like this just to cook? You can't do laundry, you can't do anything, you can't even bathe. What are you doing? Look at what you're doing.
Well, in fact, Donbas turned out to be just another scheme to siphon off funds from the Russian defense budget. The person responsible for its construction was Timur Ivanov, the former deputy minister of defense of Russia. Now he's behind bars. The same fate awaits Pushilin.
Judging by how Pushilin went to see Vladimir Putin, well, things are looking bad. Things are looking bad for Pushilin. Apparently, at best, he'll end up in prison. The Russian Minister of Housing and Utilities took him to the site where Alexander Zakharchenko, Pushilin's predecessor, was killed. Maybe it'll turn out like that. But just look at his face. He's lost about 3 times his weight. In other words, he's already figured everything out. He realized it's like an MMM. If you don't get out in time, you're done for.
If the water situation doesn't improve, Pushilin could end up in prison as early as this year. But it's more likely that he'll be replaced next year.
It could happen tomorrow, or it could be in a month. Or maybe Pushilin will take all the blame during a failed heating season. Because basically, yes, replacing him now would mean putting any successor in a position where there's no heating season in the occupied territory of Donetsk region.
The Donetsk leader will most likely be replaced by a Russian official. Someone closer to the Kremlin who will share the spoils and help plunder Donbas.
Because Pushilin allowed a certain sense of freedom where people could come out to these small rallies, you know. So who came out? It was the Homel, the homeless residents of Mariupol, who came out. These videos are all over the world. Market vendors from Donetsk, Horlivka, Makivka and so on also came out. People in Yanakiv did too, because there's no water for weeks. And for Putin, well, he sees all of this. He's aware, but he can't allow anyone to protest there. But Pushilin allowed it to happen. So Pushilin must be dismissed. His job is to shut everyone up so they don't interfere with the Tsar's belief that he's rebuilding Donbas and protecting Russian-speaking residents.
Putin has already made it clear to Pushilin that the distribution of budget funding should not be handled by shady local figures. After all, the Kremlin is already struggling to make ends meet with the new military budget.
Everyone there, except for Pupushilin, are nobodies. So even if you fire, say, the head of Donbas Water, the prime minister of the DPR, or someone else, it won't change anything. People need a public scapegoat.
The real hostages of the situation are ordinary people, local residents living under occupation with the Russian world. They continue to survive not only without water, but also without civilization.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe, comment and share if you think it's worth it. Thank you.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Ukrainian President Zelensky held a phone call with President Trump. The two leaders shared their views on the battlefield situation, discussed sanctions and talked about further defense cooperation.
He's very well informed. He knows about the Russian strikes. He knows what's happening on the front lines. And he knows that Russia is now trying to make their attacks even more intense. We in Ukraine fully support the US proposal for an immediate ceasefire. We've already tried many different formats to stop the shelling, to stop the killing. We suggested silence in the skies, no missile or drone strikes on civilian infrastructure, no strikes on the energy system. But Russia broke all those agreements. And they did it in the most cynical way. Even when they weren't using Shaheds, they still targeted power facilities, equipment. Not a single day went by without terror against civilians, not a single day of real silence on the front line. And the source of this war is Russia's obsession to control its neighbors, to dominate its neighbors, to kill its neighbors. If it weren't for that, there would be no war.
The White House has announced that Trump will make a statement tonight, around 11:30 p.m. Kyiv time. Most likely, it will be about Russia's war. First of all, Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, just visited Moscow. He met with Putin and other Kremlin officials. And yesterday, Trump said that based on those talks, he would decide whether to increase economic pressure on Russia or not. So what happened in that meeting? Could Putin agree to a ceasefire? A full ceasefire? Hard to believe. Probably not. Because that would make it look like the almighty Putin just bowed to US pressure. But a partial ceasefire, like stopping airstrikes, that's much more realistic. Especially now, with Russia's oil refineries burning and airports paralyzed. For Ukraine's rear, even that kind of pause could help. But the big question is, what will Putin demand in return? And will Trump settle for a half measure? He's already heard enough Russian promises. He's seen enough Russian terror. So if Trump really understands the Kremlin's game, he will tighten sanctions and introduce new tariffs to push for a full and unconditional ceasefire. Because any half steps now is just a delay tactic. Anyway, Trump will speak tonight, and tomorrow we'll break it all down in detail. Stay tuned. China and Russia held joint military drills in the Sea of Japan. They used destroyers, submarines and supply ships. More in the report.
Russia and China held another round of joint three-day exercises from August 3rd to 5th. This time they took place in the Sea of Japan, with several ships, aircraft and combat missions. Everything was done on a full scale. And all of this is happening against the backdrop of the ongoing war in Ukraine and Moscow's international isolation.
These particular exercises cannot truly demonstrate anything of real significance to anyone at all, and they serve absolutely no genuine purpose whatsoever, except perhaps as a kind of elaborate mating dance. Large males come out to face each other, stand impressively, show off their huge fangs and teeth, display how powerful their wings are, and generally try to intimidate one another. They might even shout, click, cackle, or roar. But almost never does it actually come to a fight during this kind of display, these mating dances, because there's simply no point.
The exercise program includes rescue operations for submarines, joint countermeasures against underwater threats, as well as air and missile defense.
There's nothing new about them. I still remember working at RT Channel 25 years ago when we used to show these Russian-Chinese exercises. They were held, I think, every year and sometimes even several times a year, depending on the international situation and whether there was a need to perform another mating dance for someone so that, the planet would look favorably on one performer or another.
Beijing emphasized that these maneuvers are meant to deepen the comprehensive strategic partnership. But is China really interested in a partnership with Russia?
We also need to work on the relationship between Russia and China. Russians and Chinese do not like each other. I don't know if you know this, but the Chinese have already changed their maps of the Far East, adding Chinese names to Russian cities. Because I think they're making it clear that one day they want to reclaim these territories.
China and Russia have been conducting joint naval exercises since 2012. But since the start of the full-scale war, they have intensified their military cooperation.
An alliance is something between equal partners. Today, China and Russia are not equal partners. Today, Russia is in a vassal, completely dependent position with respect to China. Especially when India drops out of Russia's oil trade, only China will be left. So what are we even talking about? What kind of alliance could there be? There can't be any alliance there. Putin's Russia is an apprentice to Xi Jinping. And whatever Xi Jinping says, that's what they will do.
Nevertheless, China remains neutral on the issue of the war against Ukraine. Although judging by their actions, you wouldn't say so.
China acts pragmatically in all situations, and for example, when developing economic cooperation with America, they don't stop to think about what, say, Putin and his circle might think about it. They develop it absolutely calmly. When they can strengthen their political influence and therefore their economy by interacting with some shady characters, global outcasts like the Kims or the Putins, they do that too because it's part of their policy.
Joint military actions by two nuclear powers are not just a signal, but also a potential threat. After all, such exercises can be used as a cover. Or not.
China will never go for a militaristic confrontation with America, because America is one of China's largest trading partners. China is just as dependent on America as America is economically dependent on China. Because if some kind of conflict suddenly breaks out between them, then China would lose about a quarter of its economy, about a quarter of its income, most likely. So in general, there's no need to look for some big hidden threat to Ukraine or to the civilized world in these exercises. That's simply not the case.
Meanwhile, the EU is concerned about China's growing role in supporting Russia's war against Ukraine, and as a result, they intend to push for sanctions against Beijing as well.
European Union aid for Ukraine worth 6.6 billion euros is at risk. Why? Because of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, a well-known Putin sympathizer. More coming up.
Evgenia Osipenko. Since the beginning of the year, the European Union has not allocated a single euro to Ukraine for the purchase of weapons. The financial aid that was previously provided through the European Peace Facility is effectively frozen. And it is frozen not because Europe is tired, nor due to a lack of resources, but because of the position of a single country, Hungary.
Vladimir Solovyov, the sanctions were unanimously approved by the EU countries. We are not going to change this because it would require amending the treaties. That is not going to happen. But it's not just about the sanctions. Since I left, there has been no new military aid to Ukraine from the EU. 6.6 billion euros from the European Peace Facility are blocked because of Hungary. That was the end of this instrument. Now everything has to be bilateral. And if Hungary refuses to renew the sanctions, they cannot be extended. We are stuck.
Evgenia Osipenko. While some countries continue to spend billions supporting Ukraine, others simply block important decisions. It is precisely countries like Hungary that become an internal tool of Kremlin influence within the European Union.
Alexander Gershenfeld, it seems to me that this is going to be a long-term story with Hungary. Well, unless there's a radical change of government there, yes, meaning unless a government truly comes to power that's oriented toward the European Union, toward these European liberal values, and that will listen more to Brussels' opinion, then I think Orban will pretty much continue his policy as he has been.
Evgenia Osipenko, in effect, Orban has become Putin's Trojan horse in the EU. His position undermines the very idea of European unity. If before the Union was an architecture of support, today it increasingly resembles a battleground for internal diplomatic struggle.
Ivan Oklobistin. On the one hand, it's true that the European Union has no means of exerting pressure on Hungary. And essentially what we are observing and witnessing here is the significant and persistent issue of funding. with Hungary consistently blocking crucial financing every 6 months, creating considerable challenges. At the very same time, Hungary has managed to successfully secure certain significantly better terms for itself. For example, specifically regarding crucial funding from the European Union's budget, on the explicit condition that Hungary unequivocally agrees to provide financial support to Ukraine. In other words, each country is looking for an opportunity. I mean, each country that has been against Ukraine from the very beginning. That's Hungary and Slovakia as well. They are looking for ways to increase funding for their own countries at the expense of the European budget. And basically, in this situation, to say that this can somehow be resolved quickly, well, I don't see any such options.
Yevgenia Osipenko, but even despite the blockade of one of the main funds, the European Union still has other mechanisms to support Ukraine. For example, these include bilateral aid packages, national defense budgets, reconstruction funds, grant programs and credit lines from the European Investment Bank. However, at a critical moment when this assistance is needed immediately, the EU seems to be deliberately slowing down the process.
Ivan Oklobistin, when this crucial support is most urgently needed, for some inexplicable reason, the European Union inexplicably halts the vital funding, which naturally raises serious doubts. Aren't they doing this as a deliberate way to exert pressure on Ukraine to bring an end to the ongoing war by any available means? Although, on the other hand, it should be clearly stated that not all member countries within the European Union fully agree with the immediate ending of the war. And, for example, Germany is saying the war should go on almost until a victorious end. The European Union is far from a unified structure, and many countries have their own perspective on what is happening in the country at war in Ukraine. And each of them has its own attitude toward whether to fund Ukraine or not.
Evgenia Osipenko, it is precisely Orban who is blocking the next important step, the accession of Ukraine to the European Union. A process that could have been historic for the entire continent is becoming hostage to the populist agenda of a single prime minister. Brussels officially speaks of support, but there is no political decision to admit Ukraine into the EU.
Alexander Gershenfeld. In this case, unfortunately, it is convenient for Brussels to use these particular issues as an excuse for why they are, in fact, not initiating these processes. Why? Because in reality, in Europe, until there is some clear end to the war and the formation of some kind of security framework, there is no political decision to admit Ukraine into the European Union. That is, there is talk about this, but in fact there is no political decision. So all these discussions about investments, about acceptance, about developing cooperation, they all basically come down to the phrase after the war. And this after the war is kind of a stumbling block. And for now, whether Orban is there or not, whether Fico is there or not, there will always be someone else, maybe some Austrians. Even Malta could always pop up, for example.
Evgenia Osipenko, it seems that Hungary is just a pawn in a bigger game and part of a deeper problem. And Ukraine is paying in blood for every day of delayed decisions, for every not yet the time, and for every yes but. If Europe truly wants to remain strong and independent, it will have to choose either to be a union capable of taking action or to be led by a single country. And this is not about Hungary at all.
Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar condemned Russia's war against Ukraine. This happens during a special UN Security Council session on Israeli hostages held by Hamas. Russian representatives were present. They once again sided with terrorists. So Minister Sa'ar responded with this.
So many lies. I cannot refer to them all, but it was really funny to hear Russian Federation representative after 3 years and a half of a brutal invasion and brutal war in Ukraine and bombardments on civilian population in Kiev and other places speaking here. The way he spoke. I also heard the Palestinian representative. I must say the Palestinians learned propaganda from you, from the Soviet era, and you were good teachers.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment and share this video. See you next time.